This is Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield, a podcast that resources families and friends with tools to have important conversations about mental and emotional health. This show is sponsored by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Here's your host, Trevor Sheeran.
Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations this week. We are not only joined by myself and Dr. Mayfield, but my father, Kevin Sheeran, has joined us. And as I mentioned last week on our encouragement episode, my dad is a really good example to me of what an edifier looks like. And so Dr. Mayfield and I thought it would be apropos to have him join us for this final conversation in our Steps of Encouragement series, as I
choke on your own
choke
spit
on
there.
my own whatever.
that was smooth.
So thanks for being here, Dad.
My pleasure. It's always a pleasure to hang with you guys and visit. I will come with my experience. I guess that's the best thing I can bring. So
I think that's why we have you.
I appreciate the chance to be with you.
Well, that, and he's probably the most faithful listener of my entire family, wife included.
Oh, okay.
Ooh,
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm going to use that for Sarah.
Yeah, you have another
Sorry.
sibling. Elizabeth is a faithful.
Oh, yeah, that's
nice.
right. She is.
She is pretty.
That's awesome.
Pretty interested.
I mean, we were talking about this before, just kind of seeing where we're at after being on the air for a year and a half. We've almost got 13,000 listens and downloads, which is pretty cool. I don't know what to compare it to, so I'm pretty thrilled by that. But
podcast analytics are a little bit wonky.
That is. So fifth part series?
Part five
Okay.
of our series, Edification. And I think we need to start this episode by clearly stating why there is a fifth step, because some people might say, like, okay, you've beaten this horse dead and then continued to beat it. What is edification? How is it different than anything else?
Well, I wanted our listeners to listen to this one. The refreshers are good, so the last four have been good refreshers. This one, I think, is something that we've lost in our culture, to be honest. And so when I'm talking all the time, I always tell parents, I said, when was the last time you told your kids you were proud of them for just being them? And 90% of them were like, whoa, that's a novel idea. Like,
Right.
So let's speak to that for a minute.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's been a lot. And as I mentioned, I'm usually on the treadmill or driving when I'm listening. And so I don't have great notes from memory, though. I've been encouraged by the conversation. And certainly, I think you, Mark, you had talked about just some tips for those. So parenting is probably the biggest thing in my life that I've done, and has stretched me the most in every aspect of my life. And certainly in that encouraging. And I don't know how far we go with this, Trevor. I have a reputation, I think, for being critical with my family, highly critical. And maybe I'm not OCD, but certainly have a lot of preferences on how I want things to be, how I want things done, and when I want them done. And so balancing that critical nature, sometimes a fault, with the encouraging and raising kids that, and you mentioned this as you talked about taking notes on what do you see in your kids when they're sleeping, as far as what are the positive things that you see, and what are the things that you can highlight in that. Being purposeful as a parent. And I have some men in my life, significant men in my life. And I remember your Uncle Brian and myself having a conversation about this criticalness and about how much more we need to be encouraging and building that esteem in kids. Yeah. You were talking about the lies that we hear from the culture, the lies we hear from the people around us. But some of those lies come from within us. And I don't know from a psychology standpoint if they're lies that we've heard that we've grabbed onto. You guys would understand that better than I would.
Or even perceptions of lies that we've grabbed.
Right, exactly. And that's so hard to overcome those perceptions, whether they're of ourselves or what we think other people are perceiving. Right, yeah. And so it's so important. And kudos to you, Mark, for just seeing your girls that way and desiring to do that. It's taken me a long time to get here. Just years. And I know I've missed a lot of opportunities to encourage, to edify, to affirm my kids. By God's grace, I think most of them are growing with a positive perspective of themselves. And moving out into that. But one of the things Uncle Brian said is, we did this whole thing, and I think it comes out of youth ministry culture of 7-Ups if there's a downer. Do you remember that? Yeah. And so we tried that for maybe a weekend when we were all together as families. It takes a lot of effort.
Oh, it does. It's
And I don't want that to sound negative, especially with my son sitting here, that I am purposeful, because I think there's an aspect in some of the conversation that you guys have had already is being mindful, practicing, planning, being upfront and purposeful about it, that I hope doesn't diminish the effectiveness of the encouragement or the affirmation.
We were talking about that last episode in the encouragement section of that there's just some people that aren't good encouragers. They're not natural encouragers, but it doesn't let them off the hook.
Right.
They have to have a chance to recognize, okay, that's my weakness. I want to get better at it because I need to be that presence in my spouse or my kids' lives. And so not giving up and just, saying, it's just who I am, how I am. The purposefulness is actually, I think, an act of love. Right?
Absolutely.
That we don't sometimes see.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, and I was going to say, I think from my perspective, speaking to you, Dad, I think you have always been a really good edifier and haven't taken every opportunity to encourage. And the difference between the two is the encouragement is always is based on something we're doing, an activity or an accomplishment. And that's what we've talked about in the past several episodes. Right. Is the validation is you're doing that thing right. The affirmation is you're doing that thing well and right. And the encouragement is I've seen you do all these things, and so it tells me about who you are. Edification is completely separated from that, where it's not speaking to any accomplishment or doing. It's just speaking to who you are and
character, identity,
and what you can be. And so I think, absolutely, you were very particular about what you were expecting from us, especially on Saturdays when we'd clean the house. But overall, you would speak life into us of you are. For me, you would say, you're a wordsmith. You have so much for you. I see good things for you, and I want good things for you. And so I don't think I think the two are separated enough that I feel strongly that you were a good edifier throughout my childhood, though the encouragement may have been lacking at times based on the accomplishments and hey, you did that really well, and I can see how hard of a worker you are. That may have been different, but the edification, I think, speaks more volume or has more volume.
Can we give just real quick for our listeners, just give a kind of working definition of edification? Because I think a working definition of edification, we can do Webster, but I think just something that's really practical is it's the calling out the truth in somebody for the growth and direction of the future. I think is maybe the best way to look at it. If you want to add to that, let me know. But I think that's kind of how I see it, is going, I'm going to call things that I see in you, but it's not just for today. It's for tomorrow. It's for the future.
Who you are now and who you will be.
Or can be.
Can be. Yeah.
I think some of the roots of that, and I don't know how this will play into our conversation now. I don't know where your mom and I picked this up, but there was a time as in our early parenting that we talked or heard this idea of not praising the behavior and trying to, and I think maybe some of what you've experienced is some of that swinging of, okay, we are going to look for those bigger rocks, those bigger aspects, looking more forward instead of saying good job. And then you get into this, the risk of getting into this cycle of they're seeking praise for doing the right thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's not out of their character. It's not out of their person. They're doing it to please me. And I do want my kids to please me. I mean, we've talked about, my displeasure plenty at home and my displeasure with behaviors. And maybe, and I don't want to make it too lighthearted, I'm still in process. We are all still in process. But some of that is I didn't see a lot of good. And there weren't things that, at least in the place I was personally, I wasn't in a place that I thought I could give that edification or that affirmation, if we go with that, give that affirmation and be honest with it. But I could be honest about the edification.
Sure, right.
I did believe in the future.
Yeah,
I did believe in what the potential was for each of my kids. And this works in the work environment too.
It works in, I think, a lot of different environments. But I think I want to make very clear to our listeners, too, is we're talking about your family's culture in those moments. And I think a lot of times I'm finding, Ryan Dobson and I talked about this on the podcast I was on a couple of weeks ago, is that I think a lot of families want an A plus B equals C formula for how to raise their kids, for how to do these things. And for our listeners on this 5-part series, I'm sorry, there's not an A plus B equals C, because it's unique to your family culture. It's unique to your work culture. It's unique to your marriage. It's going to be unique to those things. There's things you can pull out of all of this, right, and apply. There's truths in all of this. And I always joke, I wish there was an A plus B equals C, because we'd be doing this on, the beaches of the Caribbean right now, and with our millions of dollars that we made based off of the formula.
Right, because people would buy that.
Right, exactly.
Right. This is hard work.
It is.
But it's certainly, as I've grown, I think, Trevor, you're a big part of that growth. You're our firstborn.
At least 26 years of that growth.
You're our firstborn, and so you're like our lab rat.
Yeah.
We've experimented. But as I've been able to grow, as you have grown up, learning that, I am super surprised with how encouraged I feel by being positive in affirmations and edifications. And affirmations, that like I mentioned before, that's a little more of a challenge, because sometimes I'm like, yeah, you did an okay job on that.
that was bare minimum.
Right.
Maybe.
Right. And so how positive can I make that?
Right.
But there is
It's like you didn't suck that bad.
Yeah, that wasn't as
you
bad
guys
as it
have
could have
shared
been.
some of that in some of the prior conversations. As you guys have talked. I mean, okay, I got a sidetrack.
Go for it.
A lot of analogies about running.
Oh, I hate running.
But how does that make its way into this podcast?
It's a really
environment?
easy metaphor.
It's a metaphor.
What do you know about that?
Nothing.
Okay.
I like
I was
running.
on the treadmill, and you're talking about running marathons and how do you train, and I'm like, really? I don't even know my son.
He's secretly training. No,
We go through this course as counselors, and it's just Metaphors 101. And a path and running are just parts 1 and 2.
I just wanted to clarify that, because the running thing threw me.
he's going to do the
bit.
bowler this weekend. Didn't you know that?
No. Well, and I think so. Something I'm hearing is 2 aspects. Well, something we've talked about a lot on this show is that it takes being active and an active participant in your life and your relationships to make things grow and to work through this. And so to be affirming and encouraging and to edify, it's going to take us being active participants in that relationship and finding the things that we can edify in the other person. And the other thing that I picked up on that you were saying, Dad, which is really interesting to me, is we talked about how we don't really have a good visualization of the steps and how they work, because validation is both the foundation but also the surface level of encouragement. But it kind of sounds like edification is so different that we can build up to encouragement and then edification. But at the same time, if we run into a position where we can't even validate, the edification can motivate some process of growth towards, yeah, you did that right.
Mm-hmm. And I think edification, and I think that's a big maybe based on the relationship too, because I think you can't edify somebody unless you are in relationship with them.
Absolutely.
And I think that, I think maybe if we say like validation is the foundation, but it's also the surface, I think maybe the litmus test is the strength of relationship. Is we maybe have if we have a bar of intensity on the left with these steps, it's the relationship intensity or the closeness of the relationship or the vulnerability or trust or whatever you want to throw in there makes way for encouragement and edification. Because if I try to edify, I mean, I've made major mistakes in my life with just people in church settings or work settings where I've tried to edify and it's backfired. But like, who
you know nothing.
Who the heck are you? You have no idea who I am. And you're like, oh yeah, okay,
you're
sorry.
right.
And I hope I heard some of that conversation when you guys talked about that, that sincere edification, and maybe it was, and I keep rehashing some of the other episodes,
you're good.
But saying, oh, I love you, or
Right.
I don't know, or was that to, anyways,
was,
I don't even know you.
Yeah.
I don't even know you.
Right.
But I think edification is I think we can do all of these with, I don't know if perfect strangers, but with acquaintances, because we can call out truth.
True. Yeah.
We can see
the value of
the value
person.
of the person. Thank you. Yeah, that's right. So we can see that in them and call that out and point them towards it so that they can see it.
Yeah.
I think that's the edification.
Sure.
Is, we're saying it and we want them to hear it, but a part of them hearing that is so that they would believe it.
Right.
And then they can respond to that.
Right.
And even with acquaintances or people that we're not super intimate with, all the way to those that we're the most intimate with, there is this process of the relationship building, and they're hearing truths from us. They're hearing encouragement from us. They're hearing affirmations from us. They're going to listen more to us.
True.
They're going to believe more from us. And so we have to start somewhere. The Ackridges talk about their crazy cycle in communication and marriage. But I think that crazy cycle happens in all aspects of relationship, and just stepping out, whether it's through practice, whether it's through just specifically saying, hey, I really want to encourage you, or I really want to affirm you. I'm not sure how I do that. I just want you to know that was great what you did, or whatever it would be. And then that starts that language building for you. I think I've grown in it. I'm still growing in it because it's not natural, I guess.
There's a concept that I really like of what we speak over somebody will become what they pursue or grow into. We grow into what's spoken over us. And Bree and I right now are listening to Redeeming Love at Night. And that is such a book of
Good book.
Amazing.
This young girl who is spoken, who everybody is speaking over her worthlessness and really just utility, and speaking all of this, and she becomes a prostitute, and that's what's spoken over her. Right. And so it becomes a part of who she believes she is. And then this man named Michael comes into the story, and through this mission that's given to him, he starts speaking life and truth over her and saying, you're valuable not for what you can do or anything else, but because I love you and God loves you and you have a purpose in this world. And I see great things for you. And the entire book, we see this process of this woman who goes through several different names through the process of her growth. But each name comes closer and closer to what Michael is speaking over her, and ultimately what God's speaking over her. But and I think we see that in our own process, where if we're able to find somebody and edify them and speak over them the basic value of a person, we can tear up a dollar bill and burn half of it. We can put it in the mud. We can do whatever we want to it, and it's still worth $1. It doesn't change its value. And to be able to say to that dirty dollar bill of a person, you still have the same value as when you started off.
Well, it goes back to our story cycle that we have.
Yeah.
And we talk about all the time is that what we hear often, if we hear it often enough, we become it.
Yeah.
Or we believe it, then we become it, and then we expect it. And that could be positive or negative, right? And I think, when we, especially in this world, most of the time starts out negative.
Right.
Totally.
Right.
Yep.
And so we need people in our life that can follow these steps to really recreate the story. And I think, it's not hard for us to believe those lies. That comes naturally. But it takes time, effort, and intentionality to begin to believe those truths.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we get the opportunity. You guys just triggered some thought in my mind. We get the opportunity to write a piece or to speak into. I like the writing into somebody else's story.
Yeah.
So now, are we going to write good lines or are we going to write bad lines?
Yeah.
Are we going to write encouragement? Are we going to write affirmation? Are you going
to be the janitor in the hall of the superhero movie?
Right.
Who speaks that you're a superhero,
Yeah.
and then they become it?
Isn't that
Right.
Stan Lee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you impressed?
That was well done.
I was impressed.
I'm seeking affirmation
Yeah.
for that.
Good job. You did that really well.
Also impressed that we snuck some nerdiness into this episode too.
Always.
That was good.
I'm sorry. The podcasts are all blurring together.
That's awesome.
I think it's important that we're in that process. We can just baby step into it. There's another movie reference there. Sorry, can't stop it. But it's important. It helps. I get better at it. They hear it more often. Mm-hmm. We can make a difference in people's lives. Mm-hmm. And certainly from a parenting standpoint, we're huge influencers.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm writing that story and then believing that. And it's hard. Yeah.
Well, I want to, as we close, I want to throw out this to our listeners. If you want to get more equipped in this, save the date, November 2nd, 2019, here in Colorado Springs. We'll be doing our Springs Mental Health Summit. Mm-hmm. Our theme this year is helping families become mentally and emotionally well. And so these are the topics we'll be talking about. So you can go to springsummit.org. So www.springsummit.org. If you use the code Mayfield, Mayfield, you get 25% off registration. And we're going to have some pretty cool speaker lineups. We're spending some time this week brainstorming who we're going to invite, and it's going to be pretty legit. So,
and who knows, that might be where we finally do a live, candid conversations.
I think we need to do that over lunch. We have 90 minutes for lunch this year, so I think that'd be good. But also, as always, reach out to us if you've got questions. But Kevin, thank you for being here today.
Thank you guys.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity. I don't know. It's just fun being here. It's fun seeing what you guys are doing. I love what you guys are doing. It is so important. It's helping people, helping families. I've had my road in counseling and continue to learn and grow in that. So I'm proud of what you guys are doing with Mayfield.
Well, and in a lot of ways, everything that I'm able to do currently has stemmed through the process of your processing through therapy with my mom, and as an individual, and as I've gone through my program, I've seen a lot of the impact that your therapeutic process has had on my development as a person. And so I think it speaks volumes to every parent listening here that your own processing, taking care of your own self and your growth as a person, can have a monumental impact on the journey that your child will go through.
Yep. Well, until next time.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, you can email candid@mayfieldcounseling.com or call 719-452-4803.